Bernie and his acolytes often point to supposed socialist Scandinavian countries as a model for America, while Sweden did flirt with socialist policies in the 70s and 80s and went through a very serious transformation and is now one of the richest countries in the world. A new documentary, Sweden, Lessons for America, examines just that. Here's a peek.
By the 1990s, the economy was in turmoil and had reached a breaking point. Sweden decisively changed course. Reforms were voted in. The wage earner fund was abolished and taxes reduced. The pension system, healthcare and education were all reformed and the utilities deregulated.
Oh, come on now, that doesn't fit into the myth. So what lessons can America learn from Sweden? Joining me now is the host of that documentary. He's also an executive editor of Free to Choose Media. Johan Norberg is here. Welcome back, Johan. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So if Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were really going to implement Swedish-style reforms to make this country better, what would they look like?
I think they would be quite surprised, because in that case, the U.S. would have to be much more free trade oriented. It would have to deregulate more product markets. It would have to reform the pension system, and it would have to have very low corporate taxes, no taxes on property, on wealth, on inheritance, and a national school voucher system, so the private schools got the same funding as the public ones, because that's what we're doing in Sweden.
Yeah, but you never hear about that. You never hear about the reality of Sweden's free market reforms. And that's what has turned the economy around, because as you point out, in the 50s, taxes were low and Sweden was rich. Now in the 70s and 80s, that's when the big socialism push came. Is Bernie Sanders still stuck in that time warp?
Yeah, I think it's his image of Sweden is just like his policy stuck in 1975. Because at that time we did experiment with some sort of socialism. We doubled public spending, very high taxes, regulated basically everything. But that's the precise moment in time when Sweden began to lag behind other countries, when we began to see serious economic problems. And actually, that's the era that socialists in Sweden desperately tried to get away from. We had a socialist finance minister in Sweden who said that, look, what we did in the 70s and 80s, that was absurd, it was unsustainable, and the tax system was perverse.
Isn't it interesting, though, because that perception has really stuck, and people talk about Sweden without really knowing any of the facts or where the country is now, or the fact that we have very different economies and cultures. And in the United States, you know, I think Bill Maher was right when he argued that the Defense Department, that is a socialistic program, and that is something that places like Sweden don't have to contend with. It's also not real socialism. Now, real socialism is vastly different than people who want forgiveness on their student loan debt.
Yeah.
And what is the government's role in a purely socialistic
Well, socialism
country
means having the government owning the means of production, socializing business. And Sweden never did that, not even during the crazy years. Then you would have to go to Venezuela and Cuba, like, you know, the eating zoo animals because there's no food territory. Sweden tried to, the socialists in Sweden, they tried to socialize on the consumption side. So they increased taxes, but they never really socialized business. And that's an important difference, because they always knew that all the wealth that we need has to be created by private businesses on a free market in a free trade environment. And Social Democrats actually gave big business lots of privileges and benefits and lower taxes than others, because they knew how important they were for the economy.
That's really interesting, though, because the things they complain about most, some of these democratic socialists, are things that have not really been subjected to a free market, like healthcare and education. You know, they're still very much centrally run, and there's not enough competition, which is why they remain unnaturally high and expensive. Johan Norberg, amazing. I hope everyone watches your documentary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to see you.